A Great Argead Saga Alexine, Alexander the Great. Volume 1, Telesius, The War Dance. By Macaulay Naki. Last episode, 58, 7 Gates of Destiny. Late afternoon, October 30th, 368 BCE, the plain of Thebes. The 7 gates of Thebes loomed against the horizon like the jagged teeth of a beast, waiting to swallow the caravan of northern princes. They did not arrive in carriages of velvet and ease. They arrived as the dust-caked vanguard of a fallen state, each boy mounted upon a shaggy, mud-streaked mountain pony. Young Philip led them, his knuckles white against the frayed leather reins. His pony, small and stubborn, snorted against the biting wind, its hooves clattering rhythmically against the limestone road, a frantic hollow sound that echoed the pounding of his own heart. Behind him, 67 noble sons of the Macedonian high houses trailed in a disheveled line, their mounts tossing their heads in nervous agitation. The boys clung to their saddle bows, their faces pale masks of fear beneath their travel-stained cloaks. They were the future of an empire, reduced to a string of riders and a desolate landscape, their ponies labored breathing the only music to accompany their surrender. As they neared the electric gate, the air itself seemed to harden. From the shadows of the stone archway, the rhythm of the city changed. It was no longer the erratic clip-clop of travel-weary ponies, but a singular, terrifying pulse. Clang, hiss, thud. The sacred band emerged to greet them. They did not march like ordinary soldiers. They moved like a singular, bronze-skinned machine. 300 men, stripped of individual identity, locked into a formation that defied the chaos of the road. As the convoy passed between the ranks, the sacred band stood like monuments of hammered bronze, their shields overlapping like dragon scales. The air grew thick with the smell of olive oil, sweat, and the sharp, clean scent of wetted steel. Every head turned in absolute synchronization, 1,000 eyes tracking the Macedonian ponies with the cold, predatory focus of a hawk. The sun began its slow, bruised descent, staining the sky in violent hues of blood orange and deep, suffocating violet. As the dust of the road finally settled, the silhouette of Thebes clawed its way into the horizon, a compact, lethal entity of stone and iron. The walls rose like the knuckles of a giant and the cadmia. The citadel loomed with a quiet, suffocating strength that seemed to drain the very air from the valley. Thebes, Antigonus breathed the name. It tasted like ash on his tongue. His small hand trembled as it gripped his pony's sweat-slicked mane, his eyes darting toward the bronze-clad soldiers lining the parapets. Pethan and Leonidas said nothing, their eyes wide and glassy, mirroring the shared terror of children unmoored from their hills. Beside them, Laugus sat tall, his jaw set in a line of stubborn defiance that masked his own uncertainty, while Amintor mirrored the posture of his elder peers, though his knuckles were white where he gripped his reins. Look at them, Amintor thought, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird as he stared up at the towering ramparts. They build their walls high because they know we are coming. They hide behind stone, but when the time comes, stone crumbles just like bone. Despite his outward bravado, a cold knot twisted in his stomach. We are walking straight into the lion's den. If my father could see me now, traded like cattle, no. I will not cower. I will learn their ways, and I will use their own weapons to cut their throats. Little Cletus, the youngest of the circle, pressed closer to his pony's neck, his breath coming in shallow, jagged hitches, fighting back tears he refused to let fall. They were sons of the northern winds, children of timber and earth hillforts. This architecture of geometry and malice was a foreign language, a language of total domination. Philip felt a surge of something molten and dangerous beneath his ribs. It was not the hollow ache of fear. It was the cold, tightening coil of destiny. This forced march, this humiliating procession across the Citharon passes, was reaching its end. As he looked at the monolithic gates, he knew with the clarity of a fevered dream that his life as a prince of the north had ended the moment they crossed the border. I'm not entering a city, he thought, his gaze tracing the crenellations where Theban archers stood like carved statues. I'm entering a forge. And if I am the iron, then they are going to find out very quickly that I do not break, I sharpen. He pulled his pony to a halt and turned to the faces behind him, Laugus, Antigonus, Amintor, the brothers in arms, and the quiet shadow of little Cletus. They looked like frightened cattle, but Philip saw the fire beneath the fear. "Listen to me," Philip said, his voice, still cracking with the onset of manhood, honing a sudden razor-edged authority. The boys looked up, startled by the shift in his tone. Beside the trailing pack mules, General Parmenion reined his mount sideways, his veteran eyes narrowing as he watched Philip take command of the young hostages. A grim, approving half-smile touched the corner of the general's mouth. "The boy is learning faster than any of them realized," Parmenion thought, resting a heavy hand on his sword belt. "Let them lock these gates. They think they are caging a prince, but they are only trapping a wolf in the sheepfold." "Remember what Pelopidas told us," Philip commanded, his eyes burning with a resolve that felt ancient. "He called us guests. He thinks we are here to be unmade. He thinks he can scrub the Macedonian grit from our blood with Theban philosophy and drill ground discipline." He leaned forward in his saddle, his eyes gleaming like polished flint. "So, we learn everything," Philip continued, his gaze sweeping over the tense, dust-covered faces of his peers. "Observe their phalanx, not just how they hold their spears, but why. Observe their politics, watch how they whisper, how they betray, and how they smile while they tighten the noose. We are no longer just Macedonian princes. We are sponges. We are spies. We are ghosts. If they think they are teaching me how to serve them, they are blind. They are teaching me how to kill them." At the rear of the cluster of boys, 12-year-old Mentor swallowed hard, his jaw clenching as he adjusted his grip on his reins. A spy, a ghost, Mentor thought, the terror in his chest suddenly giving way to a hot, vindictive spark. They think they've broken us. But if Philip is going to play this game of shadows under their roof, I will watch his back every step of the way. "We are here to learn," Philip repeated, his voice dropping to a low, chilling rasp. "And if we learn well enough, if we endure this hardship until we are forged into something they cannot control, then one day we will take all of this back home. Not just the knowledge of how to build a city, but the strength to burn theirs to the ground." Pelopidas watched the scene from the saddle of his gray stallion, his expression shielded by the deepening dusk. A faint, knowing smile touched his lips as he listened to the young prince rally the boys. He had been watching Philip for weeks, observing the way the young prince's eyes moved, not with the aimless drift of a child, but with the calculated precision of a predator cataloging his terrain. He is a natural, Pelopidas thought, a brief, warm swell of paternal admiration, warring immediately with the cold, unyielding pragmatism of a general. He commands them not through fear, but through the sheer gravitational pull of his own ambition. The general felt a flicker of profound hope. In his grand vision, these 70 boys were the vital mortar that would solidify the northern Macedonian frontier, transforming a fractured, unstable backwater territory into a permanent, loyal bastion of the Boeotian hegemony. He did not yet sense the true heat rising from the boy, a contained, ravenous fire that would one day roar through the streets of Thebes, turning these very ancient stone walls into a towering funeral pyre. Pelopidas reined his mount slightly closer to his personal guard, keeping his voice low enough to be swallowed by the grinding clatter of the closing gates. "He does not see the cage," Pelopidas murmured to his lieutenant, his eyes tracking Philip's rigid, defiant posture through the gathering shadows. "He thinks he is sharpening himself on our whetstone. Let him believe it. By the time he realizes the cage is intended to be his permanent home, the habits of our discipline will be so deeply woven into his marrow that he will never be able to unlearn them." Ahead, the boys exchanged a look, a subtle electric current of shared understanding passing silently from Antigonus to Amyntor, from Leonidas to young Cletus. The humiliation of their transit faded, replaced by the grim clarity of the damned. They were hostages, yes, but in that silent, collective glance, they had forged a secret pact born of iron and survival. "They think we're broken cattle," Mentor muttered under his breath, leaning slightly toward Philip as their ponies navigated the rising gradient of the street. "Let them keep thinking it." "Keep your eyes open and your mouth shut," Philip murmured back, his voice a low, hard rasp that brooked no argument. "Every torch they light, we count. Every guard who mocks us, we study. We do not break here. We absorb." As the last bruised light of the sun bled away, the city lights of Thebes began to twinkle into existence, mirroring the cold indifference of the constellations above. Philip felt a tectonic shift within the architecture of his own soul. The road behind him, stained with the dust of Pella and the blood of his kin, was the past, a dead thing. Thebes thinks it is the master of my education, Philip mused, his hand resting tightly on his saddle bow, his knuckles wide in the gathering dusk. They think they are teaching me how to govern, how to fight, and how to kneel. But every lesson they force upon me, I will turn into a weapon. Every secret they whisper, I will memorize. Every strength they show me, I will surpass. He looked up at the electric gate, the towering bronze doors standing open like the jaws of a titan, ready to swallow them whole. A cold, terrifying sense of clarity flooded his veins. The road ahead was not a path of subservience. It was a narrow, jagged ascent toward a crown he had not yet earned. Let them prepare their lessons, Philip thought, his gaze unblinking, burning with a quiet fury as he rode deeper into the city's throat. I have a lifetime of vengeance and empire to build, and I will take every brick they give me to lay the foundation. He crossed the threshold, the iron hoof beats echoing against the stone walls like the rhythmic, unstoppable pulse of a god-king in the making. The war dance had found its dancer. Far to the east, within the shimmering gold-leaf serenity of the Susa Palace, the atmosphere was suffocatingly still. The great king of Persia sat upon his throne, his gaze fixed on a scroll that carried the chaotic, blood-stained history of the last few weeks. The assassination of Alexander II, the carnage of the Illyrian ambush, the seizure of Pella by Pausanias the Pretender, and finally the arrival of Theban eagles to snatch the Macedonian heir. A storm of chaos, the great king murmured, his voice a low, melodic tremor that silenced the court. He looked to his generals and the withered, sharp-eyed counselors who stood in the shadows. Analyze this. Tell me what becomes of Hellas when the north begins to bleed. General Artabanus stepped into the center of the mosaic, his scale armor clinking with the cold, rhythmic precision of a counting house. He did not look at the king. He looked at the map, his finger hovering over the fractured spine of the Macedonian plains. The balance is not merely shifting, my king. It is being rewritten, Artabanus said, his voice a low, disciplined rasp. Sparta is a broken blade, hacking at its own rusted pommel in the south. Athens, our perennial thorn, is gorging on our gold to rebuild a fleet they intend to sail against our coastal provinces. But it is the north that festers. He tapped the map at Pella. Macedonia is a wounded beast, caught between a viper of a region and a usurper who would burn the house down to claim the ashes. And into this vacuum, Thebes has moved with the terrifying precision of a surgeon. A counselor near the foot of the throne spat, his face contorted with ancestral hatred. Epaminondas and Pelopidas. They haven't just secured a border, they have harvested a generation. They have taken the boy, Philip, and 70 of his noble peers. They aren't guests, great king, they are apprentices to Theban ambition. They will be educated in the Cadmea, trained in the sacred band, and broken until they believe the Spartan way of death is the only path to glory. When they return to Pella, they will be Theban wolves in northern skin. The great king leaned back against the cool gilded cedar of his throne, his eyes narrowing into slits that held the stillness of a viper's. He let the silence hang, heavy and suffocating, before he spoke. A puppet is a useful tool, the king murmured, his voice as smooth as polished jade, but only so long as he believes his movements are his own will. A man who knows he's a slave eventually finds the strength to cut his throat or his master's. He leaned forward, the jewels on his fingers catching the firelight. If this union of Theban discipline and Macedonian strategic depth matures, if they combine Boeotian genius with the raw, untapped geography of the north, they will become a blade pressed against the very jugular of our satrapies in Asia Minor. They will no longer be Greeks bickering over islands. They will be a storm waiting to break. They are building a cage, the king thought, a flash of genuine, cold appreciation flickering behind his eyes. And they are putting the most dangerous boy in Hellas inside it, hoping to tame him. How little they understand of lions. A lion in a cage does not become a dog. He merely learns to loathe the man who feeds him. Tell me, the king said, turning his gaze toward the shadows where his spies waited, does the boy Philip understand that he is a hostage, or does he truly believe he is a student? Because the difference between those two realities is the difference between a puppet on a king. We must unbalance them, the counselor whispered, the words slithering through the chamber. The threads are frayed, we need only pull. We have the gold. The question is not if we spend it, but where the blood is meant to flow. The great king rose, the heavy midnight silk of his robes pooling around him like a shroud. He paced the mosaic floor, his shadow stretching toward the map of the fractured north, a dark reaching claw. Near the threshold of the balcony, half hidden by a marble pillar, a young man named Bagos knelt, his head bowed. To the counselors, he was merely a fixture, a low-ranking servant, a shadow that swept the dust and poured the wine. But Bagos's ears were as sharp as his eyes, and he did not miss the tremor in the counselors' voices or the way the king's hand clenched at the mention of the boy prince in Thebes. "Send the weight of our treasury to Alexandria Ferry," the king commanded, his voice as cold and absolute as a winter steppe. "The tyrant of Thessaly is a creature of pure, unadulterated malice. He has no love for Thebes, only a hunger for their ruin. Let him be the thorn in their side, the constant, festering fever. Let him bleed their strength and force them to look inward when they should be looking north." Bagos kept his gaze on the floor, his breathing shallow. "Gold for a tyrant," he noted silently, his mind cataloging every name. "The tyrant will burn, and the king will watch the smoke." The king stopped before the Macedonian border, his gaze lingering on Pella. And Pausanias. The pretender still paces his exile like a wolf at the gate. He craves the throne with the desperation of a starving dog. Ensure he knows the door is not merely unlocked, it is ajar. A low murmur passed through the council. "He is weak, my king," a general ventured, hesitant. "Pausanias has been broken once. He is hungry," the king corrected, a thin, sharp smile touching his lips. "And hunger is a far more potent motivator than strength. If Macedonia is distracted, if they are blinded by the education of their prince in Thebes, then Pausanias will find the courage of the desperate. Let him strike Pella while it is soft. Let him tear at the regime until they are forced to spend their remaining gold on survival, rather than the expansion of a northern empire." Bagos moved forward, his movements fluid and silent as he refilled the king's goblet. As he retreated, he caught the general's frantic expression and the king's distant, calculating stare. "They are playing with thrones like children with clay," Bagos mused, his heart hammering against his ribs. "And if the clay breaks, they will only reach for more." "And the Illyrians," the general pressed. "Bartolus is already gathering his spears in the west." "King Bartolus is a blunt instrument," the king replied, his eyes distant, calculating. "A wolf that has already proven he can tear the north into ribbons. Do not leash him. Do not guide him. Let him roam. Chaos is the most faithful servant a crown can hold. If the north is a graveyard, then no unified Greece shall ever rise to challenge our shores." Pausanias the fire, Bartolus the blade, and Alexander the venom, Bagos repeated the mantra in his head, his hand tightening around the wine pitcher. By the time that boy in Thebes learns how to be a king, he will have no kingdom left to rule, only a scorched earth populated by ghosts. "See to it," the king ordered, the finality in his voice freezing the room. "And if Pausanias fails to take the city, then he has served his purpose as a distraction. But if he succeeds, he will be a king of ruins, and I shall be the one who decides how long he remains on his throne." The king turned to his inner circle, his eyes cold and devoid of pity. "Go. Let the north tear itself apart. We shall watch from the safety of our gold, and when the dust settles, there will be nothing left but what we choose to build." He dismissed the mountainous, isolated crags of Epirus with a wave of his hand. "They are irrelevant. A kingdom of goats. Let the Illyrians bleed them. Let Neoptolemus bark in his locked room. The real theater is the throat of Pella and the heart of Thebes. Focus the gold there." The king walked to the balcony, the empire stretching toward an infinite horizon. He turned to his chief assassin. "And the boy?" "Philip of Macedon. He's held within the Cadmea, caged under the watchful eyes of the sacred band. Watch him. If he shows the spirit of a king, if he begins to understand the geometry of his own cage, if there is even the slightest chance that he might escape this tutelage as a predator rather than a puppet, kill him, before it's too late." Bagos retreated into the dim corridor, his skin prickling with sweat. A puppet or a predator, he thought, shivering as he passed the heavy doors. I wonder if the boy even knows the world is already deciding his grave. Finally, the king stood before the vast map of the Greek peninsula, his eyes tracing the path to the navel of the world Delphi. The oracle, he murmured, his voice echoing like a funeral bell. The sacred crown jewel. They do not fight for land nor for gold alone. They fight for the voice of Apollo. They believe whoever holds the sanctuary holds the mandate of the gods. He turned to his inner circle, his gaze burning with cold clarity. Look at them. They crawl toward Delphi and Olympia as if those shrines offer a future, when they are only reaching for a gravestone. Let them fight. Let them paint the sacred marble with their own brother's blood. They are children fighting over a dying fire, Bagos thought, pausing in the shadows of the doorway, his eyes fixed on the king's back. And they do not see that the great king is the one who will eventually bank the coals. Do not interfere, the king commanded. Let them turn Delphi into a charnel house. They will be exhausted, distinguished, gone. When they are truly broken, when they have forgotten why they ever sought the voice of Apollo in the first place, that is when they will be ready to serve a master who does not need the gods to command them. Bagos slipped into the darkness, his mind sharp, his path clear. The tides of the Aegean are shifting, he thought, feeling the weight of the court secrets like lead in his veins. And the dance of death has only just begun. Just as the caravan approached the shadow of the colossal iron-banded gates, General Parmenion, who had ridden silently at the flank of the column, slowly reined his stallion to a halt, raising a gauntleted hand to stop the procession. A heavy, expectant hush fell over the weary boys. Parmenion turned in his saddle, his weather-beaten face expressionless as he unstrapped a heavy leather cylindrical case slung across his horse's flank. With deliberate, solemn precision, he popped the brass clasp and unrolled a heavy standard of dyed wool, stiff with gold embroidery. At its center blazed the Vergina sun, the 16-rayed star of the Argead dynasty, shimmering with heavy gold thread that caught the pale afternoon light, like a beacon of defiant pride. Parmenion slid the polished ash with staff free, keeping the standard rolled just enough until he held it directly before the young Macedonian prince. We do not enter their gates as beggars or beaten dogs, boy, Parmenion rumbled, his voice low and fierce, carrying only across the small circle of princes. We are Macedon. Even in chains, the blood of kings does not bow. The general extended the staff, handing the heavy golden banner straight to Philip to hold aloft. Philip's breath caught. His fingers closed tightly around the cool, scarred wood of the staff, feeling the thrilling, electric weight of his lineage pulsing through the fabric. The Vergina sun, he thought, his heart hammering against his ribs as the golden rays seemed to burn into his palms. They wanted a hostage. They are getting a king in training. With a sudden, fierce surge of adrenaline, Philip straightened his spine, hoisted the golden banner high above the dust of the road, and spurred his pony forward into the open jaws of Thebes. As they neared the Electrogate, the air itself seemed to harden. From the shadows of the stone archway, the rhythm of the city changed. It was no longer the erratic clip-clop of travel-weary ponies, but a singular, terrifying pulse, the synchronized tread of the sacred band drilling within the inner courtyards. The massive, iron-studded timber doors swung open, revealing the legendary 7 gates of Thebes, not merely architectural marvels of military engineering, but a mythic gauntlet soaked in the blood of ages. Each gateway bore the weight of ancient destiny, standing as a stony monument to the gods who had witnessed the city's tragic genesis. The Electrogate, the Protides, the Homalion, the Neistan, the Cranian, the Hypsiste, and the Aegigan. Philip's eyes scanned the towering cyclopean masonry overhead, his mind instantly racing through the grim history etched into every block of limestone. These were the very portals defended by the heroic 7 against Thebes, the grim threshold where brother had slain brother in the legendary curse of the House of Labdacus. To the common traveler, they were simply checkpoints of trade and tribute. But to Philip, holding the blazing gold standard of the Vergina sun high above his head, the 7 gates were the obsidian jaws of a sleeping predator. They built their city behind 7 shields of stone to keep the world out, Philip thought, his knuckles whitening around the polished ashwood staff as the golden rays of the Argead star caught the afternoon sun, piercing through the archway. They think these walls make them eternal. But a beast locked inside its own cage is only waiting for someone strong enough to break the locks. With the golden banner fluttering in the cold mountain wind, Philip urged his shaggy pony forward, passing beneath the shadow of the great lintel, and stepping resolutely into the heart of Thebes. Clang, hiss, thud, 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 thud. The sacred band emerged to greet them. They did not march like soldiers, they moved like a singular, bronze-skinned machine. 300 men, stripped of individual identity, locked into a formation that defied the chaos of the road. The sound of their advance was a rhythmic, metallic symphony. The heavy rasp of linen-reinforced cuirasses, the precise weighted step of hobnailed boots on stone, and the low, constant song of iron, spear butts grounding in unison, shaking the very earth. Philip felt the vibration in his teeth. It was the sound of total, unyielding order. As the boys passed between the ranks, the sacred bands stood like monuments of hammered bronze, their shields overlapping like dragon scales. The air grew thick with the smell of olive oil, sweat, and the sharp, clean scent of whetted steel. Every head turned in absolute synchronization, 1,000 eyes tracking the Macedonian ponies with the cold, predatory focus of a hawk. There was no shouting, no boastful taunts, only the terrifying, mechanical silence of professional killers, who did not need to speak to assert their dominance. The boys clung to their saddle bows, their faces pale masks of terror as they were funneled into the narrow corridor of the Theban guard. Philip kept his chin high, forcing himself to breathe against the crushing weight of the Leviathan. As they passed beneath the shadow of the great archway, the metallic rhythm behind them accelerated, a grinding, rhythmic clatter that sounded like the closing of a vault. They were no longer princes of the north, they were prey, and the machine had finally swallowed them whole. The year was 368 BCE. It began with the Delesius, the ancient, brutal rhythm of the war dance. But that ritual was only a prelude, a spark that ignited a relentless, blood-soaked climb for the Macedonian throne. As young Philip and his 70 royal pages entered the beating heart of Thebes, they were flanked by the terrifying, unbroken discipline of the Laches, the sacred band. Within this legendary city of 7 gates, the future of the Macedonian nation would be tested, forged, and pushed to its absolute limits to create history's greatest conqueror. Here was the true origin of a legend, the dark soil where the seeds of conquest first sprouted, grew, and were nurtured by iron and philosophy. Decades later, that hard-won legacy of discipline and ambition would be inherited by a new generation, forged into a single, unyielding vision of a pan-Hellenic crusade. Led by Alexander the Great, the visionary son of Philip alongside his most trusted companions and battle-hardened veterans, they answered the call of destiny. General Parmenion, the veteran marshal who had guided their path through the mountain passes and secured their footing in the east, lent his unmatched tactical brilliance to the vanguard. Hephaestion, the son of Amyntar, stood immovable as his truest confidant on shadow, while seasoned commanders who had survived the crucible of their youth stepped forward to conquer the east. Antigonus, the one-eyed, who had ridden through the gates of Thebes as a boy, would command armies before becoming the master of Phrygia. Craterus, brilliant, unsteadfast, leading the unyielding might of the infantry phalanx. Pethan, rising from a terrified hostage to a prominent officer, bodyguard, and satrap, and Leonidas, serving among the elite Samotophylakes as a key pillar of the royal guard. Brandishing the blazing Macedonian golden banner, the Vergina sun, the radiant 16-rayed star of the Argead dynasty, they rode outward from the dust of Pella and the walls of Thebes, carrying the sacred symbol of their sovereign house across the Hellespont, through the heart of Persia, and onward to the very edges of the known world. End of Volume 1, Thebes, the War Dance. Continues to Volume 2, Laches, the Sacred Band. A Great Argead Saga Alexine. Volume 1, Thebes, the War Dance. A new episode every single day. Watch and listen now. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full saga now. Bookmark Volume 1, Thebes playlist. And Divine Oracle playlist. A new episode drops every single day until the epic conclusion of Volume 1. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute hit of cinematic historical drama, perfect for your daily plunge into antiquity. Subscribe to follow the bloody rise of the Argead dynasty. Thumbs up to help push our vanguard through the algorithm's gauntlet. Comment below.